I have a lot of friends in England who voted for Brexit, who are neither ill-educated, ill-informed, or even poor. And their reason for it was that it was democracy. I mean, aside from the 53% who stayed home because it was raining, because it was making government more accountable locally. It was getting rid of the yoke, this was their take on it, of an unaccountable, unelected, micromanaging group in Brussels and bringing it back to a more authentic democracy. So I'm interested in your take on that.
Yes, very, very interesting when that line is argued. It happens, by the way, that the electorate enfranchised for the referendum was a general election electorate rather than a referendum one, which means that it was restricted. So there were three groups of people who had a very material interest in the outcome of the referendum who were excluded deliberately. I mean, it was because there was debate about it in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords. They were deliberately excluded from the franchise. So, and of that franchise, of that restricted franchise, 37% of the electorate voted to leave. It happened that it was 51.9% of the votes cast on the day. Had the electorate been said to be mandating, then there was already information given to members of Parliament before the debates on the referendum bill that there should be a threshold requirement or a supermajority requirement. But when requests were made for that in the House of Commons, the minister who was introducing the bill said it's not necessary because this is consultative only, it's not binding on Parliament or the government. But the government, driven by a group of people who were very keen to see Brexit happen, decided to treat it as mandating and have gone ahead with the process against actually quite a considerable anti-Brexit democratic upsurge in the country. Some of the arguments about sovereignty, taking back control, escaping the rule of Brussels and so on are sheer distortions, mainly the result of the tabloid press, mainly in particular Daily Mail, Daily Express, newspapers like that, because it has never been the case that any of the sovereign member states of the European Union have been under the inescapable control of Brussels. Brussels has the Secretariat in Brussels, which carries out the requirements of the Council of Ministers, which are all the member state governments who jointly put forward European Union legislation and has it ratified by the European Parliament, whose members are voted by citizens of all the member states. So it's actually a more democratic system than the UK system is, because we have, unfortunately, like you here, we have the first past the post voting system, which means that successive governments are always voted on a minority. First past the post, by the way, is a very, very undemocratic system. You can easily see why. Think of a constituency or a district with 100 electors. 10 people stand, 8 of them get 10 votes, 1 gets 9 votes, 1 gets 11 votes. That's the person who goes to the legislature. The other 89% people are not represented at all. That's what happens in the UK. It's not what happens in Europe. Europe is proportionally represented. The Council of Ministers, the heads of state of the European governments, are the ones who formulate policy. The Brussels, this metaphor that people use, merely it carries out, it's a civil service, it carries out the instructions of the Council of Ministers. So this whole business about sovereignty. I can tell you, you can go online, and there's a white paper that was published by the government. Usually white papers are published before discussions in Parliament, but this one happened to be rushed out after a discussion in Parliament. The white paper on the Article 50 bill. Section 2, paragraph 1 says, the United Kingdom has never been without sovereignty. It's never been the case that it's been under the cosh from any outside body. The United Kingdom has never been without sovereignty, but it has sometimes felt like it. I'm quoting. If that is a reason to leave the EU, then we're in serious trouble. So you should get back to your chums and tell them to read that paper.